Hi everyone, welcome back. We are getting very close to the end of our book now. We've only got 3 more chapters to go. So today we're on chapter 14, and if you remember at the end of the last chapter, they were very quickly hurrying to the airport to stop Grace from going on a holiday because Manchester United needed her to be their goalie. But don't forget, Harris has turned up in the car as well, hasn't he? So chapter 14, Harris harassed in holiday hold-up. Harris, trust him to turn up out of the blue like that. I've no idea how he managed to get into our taxi without us seeing him. Ah, said Brian, it's a little cat. Hello, Pussy Wussy. You're a nice little chap, aren't you? What you doing in here then? Harris gave Brian a wicked grin and rubbed up against him as if he was the most friendliest and harmless creature in the world. Just sit still, I said, and don't you dare get under anyone's feet. Don't worry, Sammy, said Brian, I won't. We screeched to a stop at Gatwick and flew in to see if we could catch the Gordons before they disappeared for France. The place was bustling with activity. I didn't know where to start looking. We checked the departures board, and there were 3 flights for France. Which one should we try first? If we chose the wrong one, we might be too late to catch the others. Ibble-obble black bobble, Brian said, wagging his finger at the board. Oh, come on, Brian, I said. There's no time for that. Let's go to the nearest one. And off we went. There was a good chance that the nearest one would be right. Unfortunately, it was wrong. A lady in the uniform looked down the list of passengers and there were no Gordons on it, not one. Off we went again, running as fast as we could, skidding and sliding all over the polished floors and leaping over suitcases. Would you believe it? The next one was wrong too. Then it must be the last, said Brian after some thought. But the last one was just about to leave. The passengers were supposed to be boarding at that very moment. We looked out of the window and saw that the plane was already wheeling the steps out. That they were already wheeling the steps out to the plane. Then we collapsed on a luggage trolley, out of breath and out of luck, and sat for a while in deep thought. Mr. Pace is going to be very unhappy with this. We did our best, though. You're still going to be cross, Sammy. You've never seen him really cross, have you? Just then there was a strange announcement over the loudspeaker. We apologise to passengers for the delay of flight 84 to Paris. We're doing our best to clear up the trouble. Brian and I looked at each other. Flight 84 to Paris. That was the one we wanted. Perhaps there would be one last chance. We hurried to the window and looked out again. They were still trying to wheel the steps out of the plane, but something was in the way. Men were shouting and waving their arms. What is it? I asked. What's going on? Oh, it's the little black Pussy Wussy, said Brian cheerfully. It's sitting right in the way. It was Harris, all right, and he was right in the way. Every time they tried to coax him off, he dashed out of reach and sat himself down again, still in the way. Every time they made a grab for him, he dived under their feet. He sent 2 men sprawling in the short time we were watching. Good old Harris, I called, already on the move. Let's get to those passengers, Brian. Now, because that was a little chapter, I'm going to carry on with chapter 15. So this one is Gordon Girl Grabs Gatwick Glory. I've never been so pleased to see anyone as I was to see Grace then. Just in time, I thought, we're saved. It wasn't as easy, though. Brian still had a little surprise up his sleeve. Now for the test, he declared. Test? What test? I asked. Mr. Pace said I had to give her a test when we found her. He said he didn't want to see her if she was no good. You mean a test in goal? Yeah, but we're in an airport. Brian thought for a minute. Mr. Pace didn't say anything about airports, Sammy. I better do what he said. So we set up some suitcases as goals and Grace got ready to take her test. She was excited at the thought of that she might be going to Manchester United. Can it really be true, Sammy? She whispered to me. Do they really want me? Of course, I said. It was you they wanted all along. But I've only ever played then that game when you took that penalty. Oh dear, I thought. Suppose it was a fluke. Suppose she really wasn't a natural goalie. And I made her miss her plane to Paris, and Mr. Pace was waiting for a new goalie because then I told him, oh, it was all going to be my fault. I could hardly watch as Brian took his first shot. It wasn't as hard as it could have been. It curled swiftly through the air, though, and Grace skipped it to her left and caught it. What a relief. The next one was a bit harder, but Grace was a nimble mover and she still managed to catch it. In fact, she looked as if she knew exactly where it was going to go, and she was there waiting for it. Then Brian began to belt them as hard as he could, and Grace saved every one. Each time she swooped to stop the ball, a huge cheer went up from the crowd of waiting passengers that had gallop. Wallop, dive, hooray! Wallop, dive, hooray! Wallop, dive, hooray! Amazing, said Brian. I've never seen anything like it. Then she can play, I said. Well, we ought to try her out in a game, just to be sure. We began with a little five-a-side game in the airport lounge, but with Brian Bobis playing, more and more people were keen to join in. After half an hour, it was more like 50-a-side. Pilots and stewards and stewardesses and passengers waiting to leave and passengers on their way home and customs officers, nurses and baggage handlers. Everyone seemed to want to be playing. There was nobody left to watch. The announcer gave a running commentary over the loudspeakers. And it's Brian Bobis on the ball yet again. He's taken it past the lady with the big sun hat, and he chips it through to the first aid nurse, who heads it deep into the penalty area. And once more, this wonderful little goalie, Grace Gordon, leaps high in the air to claim the ball. And we interrupt this game to report that Flight 269 from Madrid will be leaving in 5 minutes. And half a dozen people gave a shout and sprinted for the departure gates. Harris, of course, had a wonderful time. There were so many feet for him to dive under. Nobody was hurt, though, and in any case, nobody blamed him. Word had got around that it was Harris who had delayed the Paris flight long enough for Brian and I to get to Grace. Harris was something of a hero. Chapter 16, our final one. We'll sneak it in. Sammy's saving Grace. Everyone knows what happens after that. How Flanchester went into the cup with a tiny unknown girl in goal, and how she saved a penalty against the great Barry Spinnaker in the closing moments. After that, the name of Grace Gordon was on everyone's lips. Not so many people remember the name of Sammy Swift, though, thank goodness. I can't say that I enjoyed my time as a football star. It made me nervous, and I was only too glad to be left alone. Mr. Pace was very nice to me when he discovered how good Grace was. He said I'd done a great service for Flanchester United. But I never played a single match, Mr. Pace, I said. I didn't even play in a training session. No, Sammy, said Mr. Pace with a smile on his craggy face. But you weren't afraid to tell the truth when it mattered, even though it was painful. And that was your saving grace. So that's the end of our story. And that's the reason why that's one of my favourites, because even if you sometimes get yourself in trouble and you make a little bit of a problem for yourself by not telling the truth, if you come out and tell the truth in the end, things are much better. I'm going to look for another book, and hopefully we'll start that again soon. But in the meanwhile, take care of yourself, be kind to each other, and stay safe just until we can get to see you all again. Bye bye.